What is happening, guys? Welcome back to Rock Guitar School. So it's been a little while since I've done a vlog sort of video, but I figured this would be a good time to do one. It's just been a crazy week, with Ace Frehley passing away, and I just heard Sam Rivers from Limp Bizkit had passed away yesterday. So it's like, really just a crazy time. A lot of the heroes that we grew up with are kind of going away. It's just like, a lot of them are getting older and just all sorts of stuff. But I particularly wanted to come on here just to talk about Ace Frehley for just a little bit and what he meant to me as a guitarist. I started playing guitar around 1988, 1989. I was just 11, 12 years old around there. I was born in 77, so kind of do the math on there. But I missed I missed the boat on all that original Kiss stuff. By the time I started to play, we were well past that. So we were already in the end of the 80s, and Kiss had been out of their makeup for a long time. But I was always obsessed with pictures, and even I remember like my aunt's basement, like from my cousins, like they had like Kiss drawings, and I remember the Kiss logo, like somebody had drawn it down there in the basement, and I was just fascinated by the logo. But I never really listened to them. I remember like there was songs on the radio, like stuff like Hot in the Shade, and I remember like Lick It Up and all that stuff. So throughout my years growing up, I started to discover. I think I always even, got obsessed with the makeup and stuff. So one Halloween, I wore the Gene Simmons makeup. So that was kind of cool. I even tried to, kind of get into the bass for a little while. But, I've always been really into just lead guitar particularly. So, again, going back, with Kiss, going back to the 70s and all that stuff. I was born in 77, so I didn't experience all that stuff that, the guys that were older than me experienced, with them just completely exploding with the makeup, and then the movie. Like I remember discovering the movie somehow. I think they had it for like a rental at the video store, Phantom of the Park. And I watched that, and I'm like, I thought it was really cool. I know like the fans love that movie. I know like Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley aren't like the biggest fans, but like even Ace Frehley himself, he said, it's quirky, it's campy, I think is what he said. And it's just got that like old school, like kind of like they're just like superheroes. Like they were just like Kiss are comic books heroes. That's how they were, when they had all that makeup, and that's basically what made the band. They took the makeup off, and then they started to hire outside songwriters and things like that. And then had a flurry of different guitar players. Vincent. I think before him was Mark St. James. I think that's what his name was. Bruce Kulick, who's probably, I think, my favorite. And then of course Tommy Thayer was the last guy, and that he was the one that actually, he put on the makeup. He put on the Ace makeup, which I always felt kind of weird about. But those guys weren't involved anymore. I think they sold the rights, to everything. So, I'm not sure exactly how that whole payout works. But obviously they all became, multi-millionaires with the whole thing, no matter what. Ace obviously joined up the band in the band again in the mid 90s, and they did that whole reunion tour, which I actually saw, but I don't really remember much of it, to be honest. I think I remember like Ace's solo, but I remember that was like a huge deal. Like you had to. I really wanted to go because I had never seen the original Kiss before, so that's kind of where I'm at. Like I always get a kick out of these guys that say like, "Oh, I was never a Kiss fan." Well, you were, whether you like it or not, because none of these bands, like a lot of these bands today, even these bands that come out with like some sort of mask or makeup, they all owe so much to Kiss, because I'm pretty sure they were the first ones to do all that stuff. This one of my favorite bands today is called Sleep Token, and they're incredible. Not only musically, and I love the whole image of the band. I really think that's cool to not see what just kind of remain a mystery, and that's what it was with Kiss in those early days. I mean, you didn't even see those guys with the makeup off. It was like a whole mystery type of thing, and that added to the whole mystique of the band. Like, nobody knew what the heck it was. What was it? Knights in Satan's Service. People were coming up with different, like, what the heck is this? Is this like some sort of cult? Or, again, back then, like, nobody had, just to make a point out of this, nobody had access to, like, what we have access today, like, the internet, for one. I mean, like, we couldn't do research, so, like, nobody knew. I found a picture this morning with Ace's. I didn't even realize Ace was a taxi driver, so apparently him and Paul Stanley, which I knew he was a taxi driver, but they were both taxi drivers in New York City, I believe in 1974. I'll post the picture right now, you guys can look at it. Back then, like, nobody could do any research on these guys. Nobody knew that who they were. Like, I was trying to make it a point, with that. Oh, Kiss. I was never a huge Kiss fan. Like, all right, well, again, like, you have to understand, like, any rock guitar player was somehow influenced, or Slipknot, for instance. I think, whether you realize or not, you are a Kiss fan, because a lot of these guys wouldn't even have careers if it wasn't for them. I mean, that's just the way it is. They broke so much ground. I mean, their stage shows were unbelievable. They were doing, like, all these crazy pyrotechnics. I pull up stuff on YouTube. I think I pulled up one last night from Maryland. I think it was 1977. Just absolutely insane. Nobody else was doing stuff like that. To do that kind of show back then, especially, I mean, with like, I mean, I don't even know what, like, as far as, like, fire hazards go, and I mean, they're basically setting off bombs on stage and flames, and Gene Simmons, like, blowing fire, and just, I mean, all those crazy theatrics too, like spitting blood, and Ace with the smoke bomb, and then he designed that himself too. They further refined it, as far as, like, the way that it integrated into the Les Paul, but he found that the Les Paul cavity, it just worked perfectly with that smoke bomb effect. And I think I read they installed some sort of light in there, like a movie light, that triggered when the smoke bomb went off. Just, I mean, that's just incredible. I don't know why somebody doesn't produce. I don't know why Gibson doesn't produce a model that actually does that. I know they produced the Les Paul with, the Ace Frehley signature model, but like I said, guys, I think we all just owe a huge debt of gratitude towards not only Kiss but Ace Frehley. Like, just these guys, like, look, I mean, it's always been debated, like it's the same thing with Jimmy Page, like, oh, like, not very technical. Like, who cares? Like, they played with such, like, balls out, just emotion, like, just, and then you can hear their influences through them. They're just, there wasn't, like, they weren't, and that was the beauty of it, that these players aren't so refined. That's the beauty of rock and roll, when it's not so refined. I mean, half of these players, when I was really teaching the guitar, I always told my students, because I was teaching rock guitar. I taught at School of Rock. And so, I mean, a lot of these guys, like, they don't even know the notes. I mean, like, James Hetfield, Kurt Cobain, I think even Ace said it himself. He, like, one of his famous quotes is like, I don't know the notes on the guitar, but I can show you how to make a guitar smoke. You know what I mean? Like, that's basically it. and that's really the aesthetic of rock and roll. I'm not saying don't learn the notes on the guitar because it can be very helpful, but the attitude, that's what it is. It's really important to realize that the attitude of yourself, putting the way that you play, really is just, you can tell, obviously you can tell a classical musician from like a Kurt Cobain. It's just far less refined. But, I think, again, just the way that we, like I said, we should all owe a debt of gratitude to our Ace Frehley and Kiss. And I think one of the final things I'll say is just I really wish they could have had one last performance. I really wish that final concert they could have had Ace come up and Peter Criss and then ended with that. Even if they just did the last two songs, just the four of those guys and then just kill it. That would have been the end. Nothing more, nothing less, and none of this hologram stuff. I wasn't really too fond of that, but they ended up selling everything. Everything got sold for $350 million. So who knows? We may see some sort of hologram show with Kiss. But I did see a cool performance from, if you look it up on YouTube, from 2018. They have it on the Kiss cruise. Ace Frehley joined Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Tommy Thayer, and then Bruce Kulick was on there too. If you look that up, they did a whole acoustic set, which is incredible. So, and I think it's like 12, 15 minutes long. So they did I think four tunes, but that was nuts. But that's a shame they didn't do that at the last show, the last live show. But guys, if you have any thoughts, rest in peace, Ace Frehley. Again, we all owe him so much, whether you liked him or not, whether you liked Kiss, but you have to realize the impact of those guys. All right, guys, have a great day and rock on.